My daughter showed up with blistering burns on her arms. Her husband said it was an accident, but the pattern told a different story. Someone had poured boiling water on her deliberately. The brass bell above my shop door chimed that Tuesday afternoon, its familiar ring cutting through the quiet hum of classical music I always played. I looked up from the Victorian mirror I was polishing, expecting a tourist or one of my regular collectors. Instead, I saw Sophie. My daughter stood in the doorway of Foster's Antiques, backlit by the harsh October sun, wearing a long-sleeved cardigan, despite the unseasonable warmth Boston was experiencing. Her face, usually bright with the easy joy of someone who loved her work teaching third graders, looked hollowed out, shadowed, like something vital had been carved away. "Mom," she said softly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I set down the mirror and the polishing cloth, my heart already beginning that terrible knowing descent. A mother's instinct is a curse sometimes. It tells you things before your brain catches up, before you're ready to know them. Sophie. I came around the counter, weaving between a Georgian writing desk and a set of Ming vases. "What are you doing here? Don't you have class?" "Teacher planning day." She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. I just wanted to see you." Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her body tense under my touch, feeling her flinch slightly when my hand grazed her right arm. She smelled like her usual lavender perfume, but underneath it was something else. Something medicinal, antiseptic. "Come," I said, guiding her toward the small back room where I kept a kettle, a worn sofa, and the financial records that kept this place running. "I'll make tea." The back room was my sanctuary, filled with pieces I couldn't bear to sell. A rocking chair my late husband Tom had restored. Photographs of Sophie growing up, a shelf of leather-bound books that smelled like memory itself. Sophie sank onto the sofa, still clutching her purse like a shield. I filled the kettle, my hands performing the familiar ritual while my mind raced through possibilities. Fight with Daniel? Money troubles? Something with Ethan? "How's my grandson?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "He's good. He's at school. And Daniel?" A pause. Too long. "He's fine. Busy with work." I set 2 cups on the small table, waiting for the water to boil. That's when I noticed it, Sophie adjusting her sleeve, pulling it down to cover her wrist, a quick, furtive movement that spoke of practice. "Of habit, Sophie," I said gently. "What's going on?" "Nothing, Mom. She stopped, her voice catching. "I just missed you," the kettle screamed. I poured the water, watching the tea leaves unfurl in the scalding liquid, dark tendrils spreading like ink in water, like secrets bleeding out. I brought the cups over and sat beside her. We sipped in silence for a moment, the steam rising between us. Then Sophie reached for the sugar bowl, and her sleeve rode up. Just an inch, maybe 2, but it was enough. The burn on her inner wrist was unmistakable, red, blistered. The skin puckered in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't a single mark. It was a splash pattern, like something hot had been thrown or poured. My hand shot out, catching her wrist gently. "Sophie, what is that?" She pulled back immediately, yanking her sleeve down. "Nothing. I spilled hot water making coffee this morning. I'm so clumsy, but I'd worked with antiques for 30 years. I knew how to read patterns, how to see the story an object told through its marks and scars. And that burn wasn't from splashing coffee." "Let me see your arms," I said quietly. "Mom, don't." "Sophie, let me see." My daughter looked at me with eyes that suddenly filled with tears. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly, like someone surrendering after a long siege, she set down her cup. She pushed up her right sleeve first. 3 burns. Different stages of healing. 1 fresh, 2 older, the skin shiny and tight where it had scarred. They ran from her wrist to her elbow in irregular patterns. Then the left sleeve, 4 more burns. One was at least a month old, nearly healed but still visible. Another was recent, the blisters intact, weeping slightly through a bandage she'd tried to hide. My vision blurred. My hands started shaking. "Who did this to you?" But I already knew. I'd known the moment I saw the first mark. Sophie's tears fell silently, tracking down her cheeks without sound. "It was an accident, Mom. Don't." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Don't lie to me, Sophie. Not about this." She crumpled then, her face dropping into her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd clearly been holding back for a long time. I pulled her into my arms, and this time she didn't flinch. She just cried. "How long?" I whispered. "A year," she choked out. "Maybe longer. It started small. He'd grab my arm too hard when he was angry. Leave bruises. Then one night, I contradicted him in front of his parents, and he—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He heated water on the stove, told me I needed to learn to keep my mouth shut, poured it on my wrist. I felt something break inside me. Not break, shatter, like one of the delicate porcelain pieces in my shop hitting the floor. And you stayed. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an acknowledgement of the terrible logic of abuse. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd take Ethan, his family, Mom, the Brooks family. They have lawyers, judges, politicians. Daniel said no one would believe a school teacher over a Brooks, that I'd lose my son and end up with nothing. The Brooks family, old Boston money. Daniel's great-grandfather had founded Brooks and Sterling Investment Bank in 1892. His father sat on the boards of 3 Fortune 500 companies. His mother was on the board of trustees at Harvard. They were untouchable, or they thought they were. "Does Ethan know?" I asked, my throat tight. Sophie shook her head. "Daniel's careful. He only does it when Ethan's asleep or not home." But her voice cracked. "But Ethan's not stupid. He knows something's wrong. He keeps asking why Mommy's sad, why Daddy yells so much." I held my daughter. This woman I'd raised to be strong and independent, who'd gotten her master's degree and built a career she loved, who'd married a man I'd toasted at her wedding 7 years ago, a man I'd welcomed into our family, a man I'd trusted with my daughter's happiness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to find Daniel Brooks and make him feel every single burn he'd inflicted on Sophie. I wanted to tear his world apart the way he'd torn hers. Instead, I took a breath, then another, because rage without strategy was useless. "I need you to do something for me," I said, pulling back to look Sophie in the eyes. "I need you to let me photograph these burns. Every single one." Sophie's eyes widened. "Mom, no. If Daniel finds out, he won't. Not yet. But I need documentation. I need proof." "Why? What are you going to do?" I thought of Marcus Webb, the private investigator who'd helped me when Tom died 5 years ago. When the insurance company tried to claim the accident was suicide to avoid paying out, Marcus had dug until he found the truth. A mechanical failure, pure and simple. He'd saved me financially and become a friend in the process. Marcus knew how to find things, how to dig up secrets, how to bring down people who thought they were above consequences. "I'm going to get you and Ethan out of this," I said. "And I'm going to make sure Daniel Brooks never hurts anyone again." After Sophie left, her burns photographed on my phone, her promise extracted that she'd be careful, that she'd call me every night, I locked the shop early. The close sign went up at 4 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. I sat in my back room, looking at the photos on my phone, counting the burns, 7 visible on her arms. Sophie had admitted there were more on her torso, her legs, places easier to hide. My daughter had been living in hell for a year, and I'd never noticed. I pulled out my old address book, the leather-bound one I kept for numbers I used rarely but valued greatly. Marcus Webb's number was on page W, written in Tom's handwriting from 5 years ago. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Webb, Marcus. It's Kayla Foster." A pause. "Kayla, it's been a while. Everything okay?" "No," I said simply. "I need your help. It's about Sophie." "I'm listening." I told him everything. The burns, the threats, the Brooks family and their power. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Jesus, Kayla," Marcus finally said. His voice had gone hard. "How bad are the burns?" "Bad enough that they're deliberate, patterned, systematic. You have photos?" "Yes." "Good, that's good." Another pause. "The Brooks family is going to be a problem. They've got reach, money, connections." "I know, but—" I heard the smile in his voice. "Everyone has secrets, even old money families. Especially old money families. Can you find them?" "I can try. But Kayla, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right. No half measures. We go after Daniel Brooks, we need to make sure he can't fight back. What do you need from me?" "Everything you know about him. His routine, his work, his habits. I'll start digging into his financials. Men like that, they always have something dirty hidden somewhere. We just need to find it." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my shop, surrounded by antiques that had survived wars and depressions and the simple passage of time. Objects that endured because they were well made, because craftsmen had put care into their creation. My daughter was well made too, strong, resilient. But even the strongest things could break under enough pressure. Not this time, I thought. Not my daughter. Not while I was still breathing. That night, I drove to Sophie's house in Beacon Hill. The Brooks family home was a 4-story brownstone on a tree-lined street where parking spots cost more than some people's cars. Old money, old power, old privilege. Daniel's Mercedes was in the driveway. The lights were on in the upstairs windows. I didn't knock. I just sat in my car across the street, watching, waiting, thinking. At 7:30 p.m., I saw movement in the kitchen window on the first floor. Daniel, tall and immaculate in his business casual attire, walking past. Then Sophie, smaller, her shoulders hunched. Then my grandson Ethan, 7 years old, with his mother's eyes and his father's dark hair. I watched them eat dinner through that window. A perfect family, a beautiful home, the American dream. Except the dream was a nightmare, and I was the only one outside who knew it. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Started digging. Call you tomorrow. I started the car and drove home, my mind already racing ahead. Daniel Brooks thought he was safe, thought his family name protected him, thought my daughter would stay silent forever. He was wrong, and by the time I was done, he'd know exactly how wrong he'd been. Marcus showed up at my shop the next morning at exactly 9 a.m., carrying a leather messenger bag and 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street. He looked the same as he had 5 years ago. Gray hair cut military short, weathered face that had seen too much, eyes that missed nothing. Kayla. He set 1 coffee in front of me. Black, 2 sugars. You still take it that way? I do, thank you. I gestured to the back room. We should talk privately. Once we were seated, Marcus pulled out a laptop and a yellow legal pad. I spent last night doing preliminary research on Daniel Brooks. Want the good news or the bad news first? Bad news. The Brooks family is exactly as connected as you feared. Daniel's father, Richard Brooks, sits on the board of 3 major corporations. His mother, Catherine, is on Harvard's board of trustees and chairs 2 nonprofit foundations. Daniel himself works at Brooks & Sterling, the family bank. He's vice president of private wealth management. I sipped my coffee, waiting. The good news, Marcus continued, is that men in positions like Daniel's always have vulnerabilities. Always. They think they're above scrutiny, so they get sloppy. And when I started looking at Daniel Brooks's financial footprint, he smiled. There are some very interesting patterns. What kind of patterns? Marcus turned his laptop toward me, showing a spreadsheet with rows of numbers and dates. These are Daniel's credit card statements from the past 18 months. I have a contact who can access these things quietly. Look at this. He pointed to a series of charges. High-end restaurants, hotels, always on weeknights, always charged to his personal card, not his corporate card. He's having an affair, I said. That's what I thought at first. But then I noticed these. Marcus scrolled down. Cash withdrawals, large ones, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, all from different ATMs, all in the same neighborhood, the financial district. Gambling? Maybe. Or paying someone off. Or, Marcus pulled up another document. This is where it gets interesting. Daniel Brooks has been moving money, lots of money, from client accounts to offshore entities. I felt my pulse quicken. He's embezzling? I can't prove it yet, but the pattern is there. Money moves out of client accounts, gets routed through 3 or 4 shell companies, ends up in accounts in the Cayman Islands. Then smaller amounts come back, get deposited into Daniel's personal accounts disguised as consulting fees or investment returns. How much money are we talking about? Marcus looked at me steadily. Conservatively, 3 to 4 million over the past 2 years. I sat back, processing this. Daniel Brooks wasn't just an abuser. He was a thief, a white-collar criminal stealing from the wealthy clients who trusted him. Can you prove it? I asked. Not yet. I need more access, more documents. But Kayla, Marcus leaned forward. If we can prove the financial crimes, we can use that as leverage. The Brooks family might protect Daniel from domestic violence charges. Rich families always do. But financial crimes, stealing from other rich people, that's different, that they can't ignore. How long will it take? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. I need to follow the money trails, document everything. In the meantime, he pulled out a small box from his messenger bag. I want you to give this to Sophie. I opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm. It's a GPS tracker, Marcus explained. If Daniel escalates, if Sophie needs to run, we'll be able to find her. And if anything happens to her, his face darkened, we'll know exactly where to look. That afternoon, I drove to Sophie's school. Brookline Elementary was a 3-story brick building with cheerful murals painted on the walls outside. I'd been here countless times for Ethan's events, for parent-teacher conferences, for school plays. I waited in my car until the final bell rang at 3:15 p.m. Students poured out, backpacks bouncing, voices high with the joy of freedom. I spotted Ethan in the crowd, his dark hair catching the sunlight. Then Sophie emerged, walking with another teacher, laughing at something. For a moment she looked like her old self, bright, engaged, alive. Then she saw me, and the mask slipped. The smile faded. I got out of the car and waved. "Sophie, I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd say hi." She excused herself from her colleague and walked over, Ethan running ahead to hug me. "Grandma!" He threw his arms around my waist. "Are you picking me up today?" "Not today, buddy. Just stopping by to see your mom." Sophie's eyes searched mine. "Is everything okay?" "Fine. Can we talk for a minute?" I glanced at Ethan. "Alone?" She nodded, then called to another teacher. "Jenny, can you watch Ethan for a minute?" We walked to the far side of the parking lot, away from the crowds of parents and children. "Marcus found something," I said quietly, pulling out the bracelet. "Daniel's been stealing money, millions of dollars, from his clients." Sophie's eyes widened. "What?" Marcus is gathering proof. "But Sophie, this is good. This gives us leverage. The Brooks family will protect him from domestic violence charges, but they can't protect him from financial crimes. Not when he's stealing from other wealthy families. I don't understand. How does this help? Because when we go after Daniel, we won't just go after him for hurting you. We'll go after him for everything. The abuse, the theft, all of it. We'll make sure he can't threaten you with custody, can't use his family's influence to bury this." Sophie took the bracelet with shaking hands. "What is this?" "GPS tracker, just in case. If he escalates, if you need to run, Marcus and I will be able to find you." "Mom, if Daniel finds this..." "He won't. It looks like a regular bracelet. Just wear it, please." Sophie looked at the delicate silver chain, then back at me. "You're really doing this? You're going after him?" "I'm going after him," I confirmed. "But I need you to be careful." "Can you do that? Can you keep acting normal, not let him suspect anything?" She nodded slowly. "I can try. And Sophie..." I gripped her hands. "If he hurts you again, you call me immediately. Day or night. Promise me." "I promise." I hugged her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the fragility of her body against mine. "My daughter, my baby girl, we're going to get through this," I whispered. "I swear to you." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of careful planning and mounting tension. Marcus worked his contacts, following money trails through shell companies and offshore accounts. I maintained my shop, smiled at customers, and spent my evenings learning everything I could about financial crimes and domestic violence law. Sophie called me every night at exactly 9 p.m. after Ethan was asleep. Our conversations were careful, coded. "How was your day?" I'd ask. Good meant Daniel was calm. Fine meant he was irritable but not violent. Okay meant she was scared. Most nights, she said fine. Then, on a Friday night, 13 days after Marcus started his investigation, Sophie called at 11:47 p.m. "Mom." Her voice was tight with pain. "I need you. I was already reaching for my car keys." "Where are you?" "Home. Daniel's asleep." "But Mom, it's bad this time." "I'm coming. 20 minutes. Can you make it to the front door?" "Yes." I drove through empty Boston streets, my heart hammering against my ribs. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When I pulled up to the brownstone, Sophie was waiting on the front steps, wrapped in a coat despite the warm night. She got into my car without a word. "Hospital," I said. "Now." "No, Mom. If he wakes up and I'm gone." "I don't care. We're going to the hospital." I went to one of the best hospitals in Boston. In the bright lights of the emergency room, I finally saw the damage. The burns on Sophie's arms were worse than before. Fresh. Multiple. And there was a new one on her collarbone, visible above the neckline of her shirt. A nurse took us back immediately. Dr. Sarah Martinez. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. Examined Sophie with professional efficiency. These burns are consistent with scalding water being deliberately poured on the skin, she said flatly, making notes on her tablet. Mrs. Brooks, who did this to you? Sophie looked at me. I nodded. My husband, she whispered. Dr. Martinez didn't look surprised. How long has this been happening? A year. Maybe longer. I'm required by law to report this to the police. Do you consent to that? Sophie's face went pale. If the police come, he'll know I told. Mrs. Brooks, Dr. Martinez said gently, sitting down beside the exam table. I've been an ER doctor for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of cases like yours. And I can tell you with certainty, it will get worse. Abusers always escalate. Always. His family, I don't care who his family is. No one has the right to do this to you. I stepped forward. Doctor, is there any way to document everything without filing a police report tonight? Just buy us a little more time? Dr. Martinez studied me. You're planning something. I'm gathering evidence. We need everything documented, but we need to control the timing. She nodded slowly. I can document everything in the medical record. Take photographs. Write a detailed report. The police report can wait 24 hours, but not longer than that. Understood? Understood. Thank you. Dr. Martinez spent the next hour photographing every burn, every bruise, every mark on Sophie's body. She documented 23 separate injuries in various stages of healing. When we left the hospital at 3 a.m., I drove Sophie back to Beacon Hill. You can't go back in there, I said, as we sat in the car outside her house. I have to. Ethan's inside. I can't leave him alone with Daniel. Then bring him. Both of you can stay with me. Mom, if I take Ethan and disappear, Daniel will call the police. He'll say I kidnapped him. His lawyers will destroy me. She was right. We needed to do this legally, carefully. Okay, I said. But promise me you'll be careful. And if he touches you again, I'll call. I promise. I watched her slip back into the brownstone, my stomach churning with the wrongness of it. My daughter walking back into hell because the law and society and money all conspired to trap her there. Not for much longer, I thought. Not if I had anything to say about it. The next morning, Marcus called. I've got him. I was at the shop, pretending to work, but really just counting down the hours until Sophie's 9 p.m. call. You found proof? I found everything. Offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified client statements. Daniel Brooks has been systematically stealing from his clients for at least 3 years. The total? Just over $6 million. Jesus, it gets better. One of his victims is Senator Morrison. You know the Senator Morrison who chairs the Senate Banking Committee? I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Daniel stole from a senator? $250,000. Morrison has no idea yet. The theft was disguised as legitimate investment losses. But when this comes out, Marcus laughed, sharp and satisfied. The Brooks family won't be able to protect him. Not from this. What do we do now? We need to bring this to the SEC and the FBI, but we should coordinate with the domestic violence charges. I'm thinking we approach the district attorney's office first, show them everything, the abuse, the financial crimes. Let them build a case that's ironclad. How soon can we move? I have a contact in the DA's office. Give me 48 hours to set up a meeting. Those 48 hours felt like 48 days. Sophie called each night. Fine, fine, okay. On the third night, her voice was different, lighter. Daniel's going to New York tomorrow. Business trip. He'll be gone for 3 days. Relief flooded through me. Good. That gives us time. The next morning, Marcus and I met with Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Chen in her office downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she didn't lose often. Marcus laid out everything. The photographs of Sophie's burns, the medical records from MGH, the financial documents showing Daniel's theft, bank statements, wire transfers, shell company registrations. Ada Chen listened without interrupting, making occasional notes. When Marcus finished, she sat back in her chair. This is a strong case, she said. Very strong. The domestic violence charges alone would be difficult with the Brooks family's resources, but adding financial crimes, she smiled. That changes everything. Can you prosecute? I asked. I can. But I need Mrs. Brooks to cooperate fully. She'll need to testify, show her scars, tell her story in court. And Mr. Webb, she turned to Marcus. I need all of your evidence. Everything. Chain of custody matters. We can't have any defense attorney claim this was obtained illegally. Everything I gave you was obtained through legal channels, Marcus said. Bank records from subpoenas I filed under my PI license. Public corporate records. Nothing illegal? Good. Ada Chen opened a file. Here's how this will work. We'll start by filing domestic violence charges. That will trigger an immediate restraining order. Mr. Brooks will be prohibited from contacting Mrs. Brooks or their son. Then, while that's proceeding, we'll file the financial crimes charges. I'll coordinate with the FBI and SEC. How long before he's arrested? I asked. If Mrs. Brooks is willing to testify under oath to the abuse, we can file charges tomorrow. Mr. Brooks will be arrested within 48 hours. I pulled out my phone and called Sophie. She answered on the second ring. Mom? Sophie, I'm at the district attorney's office. Are you ready to do this? Are you ready to testify? A long pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her weighing the decision. Then, yes, I'm ready. 2 days later, Daniel Brooks was arrested at his office at Brooks and Sterling. Marcus had a contact who sent us a photo. Daniel in handcuffs, being walked out of the building by 2 FBI agents, his face a mask of shock and rage. The arrest made the evening news. Daniel Brooks, VP of Brooks and Sterling Bank, arrested on charges of domestic violence and financial fraud. Brooks is accused of stealing over $6 million from clients, including Senator James Morrison. I watched the news coverage with Sophie and Ethan at my house. Sophie had moved in the day Daniel was arrested, bringing 2 suitcases and her son. Ethan didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. Is Daddy in trouble? He asked. Yes, sweetheart, Sophie said gently. Daddy did some bad things. He hurt people. And now he has to face consequences. Did he hurt you? Sophie looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. Then she rolled up her sleeve, showing Ethan the scars. Yes, baby. He did. Ethan stared at the marks on his mother's arm. Then, in the way of children who understand more than adults think, he wrapped his small arms around her. I won't let him hurt you anymore, he said fiercely. I'm the man of the house now. Sophie pulled him close, crying into his hair. You're my brave boy. I turned away, giving them privacy, but not before I felt my own tears start to fall. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Daniel tried to make bail, but Ada Chen argued successfully that he was a flight risk with offshore accounts and family money. He remained in custody. The Brooks family hired 3 different law firms to defend him. They issued statements calling the charges baseless and vindictive. Catherine Brooks, Daniel's mother, went on the local news to claim Sophie was lying, that she was trying to extort money from the family. Then Senator Morrison held a press conference. I am shocked and appalled to learn that Daniel Brooks, whom I trusted with my family's investments, has allegedly stolen over $250,000 from my accounts. If these charges are proven true, I will advocate for the maximum possible sentence. No one, no matter their family name or social standing, is above the law. After that, the Brooks family's public defense of Daniel went quiet. Marcus continued to dig, finding more victims, more stolen money. The total climbed to $8 million. 12 families. Some of them had lost their life savings. Sophie prepared for trial with Ada Chen. They practiced her testimony over and over. What happened? When? How Daniel threatened her. How he'd poured boiling water on her arm while telling her she needed to learn respect. I watched my daughter transform during those practice sessions. The scared, broken woman who'd shown up at my shop was slowly being replaced by someone harder, stronger, a survivor who'd decided to fight back. 3 months after Daniel's arrest, I received a phone call from an unknown number. Mrs. Foster? A woman's voice, cultured, cold. Yes? This is Catherine Brooks, Daniel's mother. I think we should meet. I felt my spine stiffen. I have nothing to say to you, please. Just coffee, 1 hour. I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a cafe in Back Bay, expensive and discreet. Catherine Brooks looked exactly like what she was. Old money, impeccable taste, a woman who'd never had to worry about anything as vulgar as a price tag. She was in her 60s, silver hair in a perfect chignon, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. Mrs. Foster, thank you for coming. Mrs. Brooks, what do you want? She stirred her coffee, black, no sugar, and didn't look at me. I want to apologize. That surprised me. Apologize? My son is a monster. I knew it. I've known it for years. She finally met my eyes. His first wife, Melissa. Did you know about her? I shook my head. They were married for 2 years before Sophie. It ended badly. Melissa claimed abuse. We paid her to go away. A settlement. An NDA. I told myself she was lying, that she wanted money. Catherine's hands trembled slightly. Then Sophie. And I knew. And I did nothing. Why are you telling me this? Because the FBI came to see me yesterday. They want me to testify about Daniel's financial crimes. About shell companies he set up using family trust documents I signed without reading. She looked at me, and I saw something that might have been shame. My signature is on paperwork that helped him steal millions. If I don't cooperate, I could be charged as an accessory. So you're here to save yourself. I'm here to tell you that I won't fight the charges anymore. I won't fund his defense. I won't use my influence to help him. She pulled an envelope from her purse. This is Melissa's contact information. She's willing to testify about what Daniel did to her. And this, she pulled out another document, is a statement I've prepared for the prosecution. Everything I know about Daniel's violence, his theft, his threats, I took the documents, scanning them. They were damning. Why? I asked. Because I enabled him. I protected him when I should have stopped him. And now? Her voice cracked slightly. Now I have to live with the fact that my son is a criminal and an abuser, and that I helped make him that way. She stood up, leaving a $50 bill on the table for 2 cups of coffee. I hope your daughter finds peace. Mrs. Foster, I truly do. Then she left, and I sat alone with documents that would help bury Daniel Brooks. The trial began on a cold Monday in March, 6 months after Daniel's arrest. The courthouse was packed with reporters, victims of his financial crimes, and curious onlookers drawn by the spectacle of a wealthy family's downfall. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, Sophie on my right, Marcus on my left. ADA Jennifer Chen stood at the prosecutor's table, organized and confident. Across the aisle, Daniel sat with his legal team, 3 lawyers from one of Boston's most expensive firms, all wearing identical expressions of professional concern. Daniel had lost weight in jail. His expensive suits no longer fit quite right. His face had a gaunt quality, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when he looked at Sophie, his expression was pure hatred, cold, calculating, promising retribution. Sophie didn't look away. She met his stare with something I'd never seen in her before, defiance. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison was a black woman in her 50s, with a reputation for being fair but tough. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everyone present. "Be seated," she said. "We're here for the trial of Daniel Christopher Brooks, charged with multiple counts of domestic violence, assault with intent to cause bodily harm, and financial fraud. Are both sides ready to proceed?" "Ready, Your Honor," Ada Chen said. "Ready," Daniel's lead attorney confirmed. "Then let's begin. Ms. Chen, your opening statement." Ada Chen stood and approached the jury, 12 people who would decide Daniel's fate. 6 women, 6 men, ranging from their 20s to their 60s, a cross-section of Boston. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Chen began, her voice clear and strong. "Over the next few days, you're going to hear a story about 2 different Daniel Brooks. There's the Daniel Brooks the public saw, successful banker, devoted husband, respected member of one of Boston's oldest families. And then there's the real Daniel Brooks, the man who systematically tortured his wife with boiling water, the man who stole over $8 million from families who trusted him, the man who threatened to destroy anyone who dared to expose him." She clicked a remote, and images appeared on the large screen, photographs of Sophie's burns. The jury gasped. Several people in the gallery whispered. "These are not accidents," Chen continued. "These are deliberate burns inflicted over the course of 18 months. Burns that doctors will testify could only have been caused by boiling water being poured directly onto skin. And while Daniel Brooks was torturing his wife at home, he was also stealing from his clients at work. We will show you bank records, wire transfers, and testimony from victims who lost their life savings because they trusted a man with a famous last name." Chen turned to face Daniel directly. "The defendant wants you to believe he's the victim of a vindictive wife and an overzealous prosecution. But the evidence will show you the truth. Daniel Brooks is a violent criminal who thought his family name made him untouchable. It doesn't. No one is above the law." Daniel's attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Hastings, gave his own opening statement. He painted Sophie as an unstable woman who'd fabricated abuse claims to gain leverage in a divorce. He claimed the financial crimes were misunderstandings, legitimate business transactions that prosecutors were deliberately mischaracterizing. But I watched the jury's faces. They weren't buying it, not after seeing those photographs. The first witness was Dr. Sarah Martinez from hospital. "Dr. Martinez," Ada Chen said, "you treated Sophie Brooks in your emergency room on the night of November 17th. Can you describe what you observed?" Dr. Martinez's testimony was clinical and devastating. She described 23 separate burn injuries in various stages of healing. She explained the pattern analysis that proved these weren't accidental. "In my professional opinion," she concluded, "these burns were deliberately inflicted over a period of at least 12 to 18 months. The patterns are consistent with scalding water being poured or thrown onto the skin. Some of the burns show evidence of restraint, marks on the wrists that suggest Mrs. Brooks was held down while boiling water was poured on her arms. Several jurors looked ill. One woman was quietly crying. Hastings tried to discredit Dr. Martinez on cross-examination, suggesting she'd been influenced by Sophie's story, that she'd interpreted the evidence to fit a narrative. Dr. Martinez shut him down. "Mr. Hastings, I've been an emergency room physician for 15 years. I've treated thousands of burn victims. I know the difference between an accidental burn and a deliberate one. These were deliberate. There's no doubt in my mind." The next witness was Marcus Webb. Marcus walked the jury through his investigation, how he'd traced Daniel's financial crimes, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the falsified statements. He presented bank records, wire transfer logs, corporate documents. The paper trail was overwhelming. "Mr. Webb," Ada Chen said, "how much money did Daniel Brooks steal in total?" $8.3 million from 12 different families over a 3-year period. And how did he hide this theft? He created a complex web of shell companies, entities that existed only on paper. Client money would be transferred to these shells, then moved through several more companies, then deposited into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts would come back disguised as investment returns, but the bulk of the money stayed offshore under Daniel's control. On cross-examination, Hastings tried to claim Marcus had obtained evidence illegally. "Mr. Webb, you're not law enforcement. How did you access my client's private financial records?" "I didn't access private records," Marcus replied calmly. "I filed legal subpoenas under my license as a private investigator. Everything I obtained was done through proper legal channels. The bank records came from subpoenas. The corporate documents are public records. The wire transfers were provided by banks in response to law enforcement requests. But you were working for Mrs. Brooks's mother. You had a personal interest in building a case against my client." "I had a professional interest in finding the truth," Marcus corrected. "And the truth is that your client is a thief who stole millions of dollars from families who trusted him." Judge Morrison sustained ADA Chen's objection before Hastings could respond. On the 3rd day of trial, Sophie took the stand. I watched her walk to the witness box, watched her place her hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth. She looked small in that chair, surrounded by lawyers and court officers and the weight of the legal system. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Please state your name for the record," Ada Chen said. "Sophie Elizabeth Foster Brooks. And how long were you married to the defendant?" 7 years. "Can you tell the jury when the abuse began?" Sophie took a breath. "About 18 months into our marriage. At first it was verbal. He'd call me stupid, worthless, a bad mother. Then he started pushing me, grabbing my arms hard enough to leave bruises. The first burn happened about a year ago. Can you describe that incident?" "We were at a dinner party with his parents. I contradicted something Daniel said about politics. It was nothing important, just a disagreement about a local election. But when we got home, he was furious. He said I'd embarrassed him in front of his family. He went to the kitchen, heated water on the stove, and—" her voice caught. "He grabbed my wrist and poured the boiling water on it. He told me I needed to learn to keep my mouth shut." "What did you do?" "I ran cold water over it. I cried." He apologized later, said he'd lost his temper, that it would never happen again. Sophie's laugh was bitter. "But it did happen again. And again. Anytime I said something he didn't like, anytime I questioned him, anytime I didn't act exactly how he wanted, more burns. Mrs. Brooks, I need you to show the jury your scars." Sophie stood and rolled up her sleeves. The courtroom went silent. Even after months of healing, the scars were visible, pale, shiny patches of skin that told the story of systematic torture. "How many times did he burn you?" Chen asked. I stopped counting after 20. Sometimes it was small, just a splash on my wrist. Sometimes it was worse. The burn on my collarbone. She pulled down the collar of her blouse slightly. That one happened because I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. I watched the jury. Several were crying now. Others looked angry. One man was clenching his fists so hard his knuckles were white. Hastings's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to paint Sophie as vindictive, asking if she'd ever discussed divorce, if she wanted access to Daniel's money, if she'd coached her testimony with prosecutors. Sophie held firm. Mr. Hastings, I didn't want money. I wanted my husband to stop burning me with boiling water. I stayed because he threatened to take my son. I finally left because my mother gave me the courage to fight back. Your mother who's sitting right there? Hastings gestured at me. The woman who hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my client? My mother who saved my life, Sophie corrected. Yes. The fourth day brought Melissa Harper, Daniel's first wife. Melissa was a petite woman in her late 30s with dark hair and nervous energy. She'd been living in California, had remarried, had rebuilt her life. But she'd flown across the country to testify. Ms. Harper, Ada Chen said, you were married to Daniel Brooks from 2008 to 2010. Can you tell the jury about your marriage? It started well, Melissa said quietly. Daniel was charming, attentive, generous. But after we got married, things changed. He became controlling. He wanted to know where I was every minute, who I talked to, what I spent money on. And if I didn't meet his standards, she stopped, swallowing hard. What happened when you didn't meet his standards? He'd punish me. At first it was just yelling. Then he started pushing me, grabbing me. Then she rolled up her sleeve, showing faded scars that looked eerily similar to Sophie's. He started burning me with hot water, just like he did to Sophie. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order. Miss Harper, why didn't you report this abuse? I tried. I went to the police once. But the Brooks family, they have lawyers, connections. Daniel's mother paid me $200,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and go away quietly. She said if I didn't take the money, they'd destroy me in court, make me look crazy. I was scared. I was alone. So I took the money and left. And now you're here, violating that NDA. Yes, because when I heard Daniel did the same thing to Sophie, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The NDA doesn't matter. What matters is stopping him before he hurts someone else. Hastings tried to discredit Melissa, calling her a gold digger who'd taken $200,000 and was now looking for more attention. But the scars on her arms told their own story. On the fifth day, Senator Morrison testified about the financial crimes, describing how he'd trusted Daniel with his family's investments and lost $250,000. Other victims testified too. Elderly couples who'd lost their retirement savings. Young families whose children's college funds had vanished. All of them trusted Daniel because of his family name. All of them had been betrayed. The trial lasted 8 days total. When both sides rested and gave their closing arguments, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Morrison asked. The 4 women stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of domestic violence in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. Sophie grabbed my hand. On the charge of assault with intent to cause bodily harm? Guilty. On the charges of financial fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering? Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Daniel's face went white. His lawyers immediately began conferring. Ada Chen allowed herself a small smile. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order! Mr. Brooks, please stand. Daniel stood, his expensive suit hanging on his thinner frame. You have been found guilty of horrific crimes, Judge Morrison said. You tortured your wife. You stole millions from families who trusted you. You thought your family name put you above the law. You were wrong, she paused, letting the words sink in. On the domestic violence charges, I sentence you to 15 years. On the financial crimes, I sentence you to 20 years. These sentences will run consecutively. You will serve 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 20. Daniel's knees buckled. His lawyers caught him. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims of your financial crimes. The total amount is $8.3 million plus interest and damages. Your assets will be seized and liquidated to pay these debts. She looked at Sophie. Mrs. Brooks, I'm granting your petition for divorce and awarding you full custody of your son. Mr. Brooks will have no contact with you or your child, ever. Sophie started crying. I put my arm around her, holding her while she sobbed with relief. As they led Daniel away in handcuffs, he turned and looked at us one last time. His face was twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he mouthed. That night, we celebrated quietly at my house. Sophie, Ethan, Marcus, and me. Chinese takeout and sparkling cider. Ethan didn't fully understand what had happened, but he understood his mother was happy for the first time in a long time. "Grandma," he said, "does this mean we can stay with you forever?" "As long as you want," I promised. But Daniel's words haunted me. This isn't over. 2 weeks after the trial, the letters started. The first one arrived at my shop, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words cut from magazines like a ransom note. "You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from you." I called Marcus immediately. He contacted Ada Chen, who contacted the prison. Daniel was placed in solitary confinement, his male privileges revoked. But the letters kept coming. To my shop, to Sophie's school, to my house. "I have friends on the outside. They know where you live. Your daughter will pay for what she did. You can't hide forever." Marcus hired security, a retired cop named Jimmy, who sat in his car outside my house every night. Another guard at Sophie's school. But the letters kept coming. Then 3 weeks after sentencing, the man appeared. I was closing up the shop one evening when I noticed him, tall, heavy-set, wearing a Red Sox cap pulled low. He was standing across the street, just watching. When I looked at him, he smiled. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, and walked away. "I called Marcus. Gray hoodie, Red Sox cap, about 6'2". Marcus asked. "Yes. How did you know?" "He's been following Sophie, too. I've got photos. His name is Viktor Kozlov. Ex-military dishonorable discharge, currently works as—" Marcus paused. "As muscle for hire. Daniel hired him. Looks that way. I've got contacts checking his finances, but he's smart. Payments probably went through intermediaries. What do we do? You and Sophie need to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your phones charged. And Kayla," his voice was serious, "start thinking about whether you want to stay in Boston." That conversation haunted me. Leave Boston? Leave my shop, my home, my entire life? But then I thought about Sophie's scars, about Ethan growing up in fear, about Viktor Kozlov following my daughter to her school. Maybe leaving was the only way to truly be free. I broached the subject with Sophie that night after Ethan was asleep. "Mom, I can't ask you to give up your whole life because of Daniel. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sophie, we could start over somewhere else. Somewhere warm. Somewhere Daniel's shadow can't reach. Where would we even go?" I'd been thinking about this. Portland, Oregon. It's across the country. Good schools for Ethan. You could get a teaching job. I could open a small shop. Marcus has contacts there who could help us get settled. Sophie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You'd really do that? Leave everything?" "Everything here is just things," I said. "You and Ethan, you're what matters. You're my family." We decided to wait until the school year ended, giving us 3 months to plan. Marcus began making arrangements, finding us a house to rent in Portland, connecting us with a lawyer there who specialized in witness protection-style relocations, researching schools for Ethan. But Viktor Kozlov didn't wait 3 months. 6 weeks after Daniel's sentencing, I was walking to my car after work when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, deliberate. I turned and saw him, Viktor Kozlov, Red Sox cap gone, face visible. He was smiling. "Mrs. Foster," he said pleasantly. "We should talk. I have nothing to say to you." "That's a shame." "Because I have a message from Daniel Brooks. He says to tell you that if you don't drop the charges, if you don't convince your daughter to recant her testimony, bad things will happen. Maybe not to you. Maybe to your grandson. Kids walk to school every day. So many things can happen to kids." My blood ran cold. "You're threatening my grandson?" "I'm delivering a message. What you do with it is up to you." He turned to walk away. That's when I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Wait," I called. "How much is Daniel paying you?" He stopped, turned back. "Why? Curious. How much does it cost to threaten a 7-year-old child?" Victor smiled. 10 grand. 5 up front, 5 when you back down. And if we don't back down? Then Daniel pays me another 20 to make the problem go away. Permanently." He was still smiling. He thought this was a game. "You realize I'm recording this conversation," I said, holding up my phone. His smile vanished. He lunged toward me, but I'd already sent the recording to Marcus, to Ada Chen, to 911. And I'd been holding my car keys, the key pointed out between my fingers like a weapon. When Victor grabbed my arm, I raked the key across his face. He screamed, stumbling back, blood pouring from the gash across his cheek. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Victor ran, but we had him on tape, threatening a child, admitting to being hired by Daniel. Conspiracy to commit murder. He was arrested 6 hours later at his apartment. The police found more evidence. Text messages from a burner phone traced to someone in Daniel's prison, payment records showing transfers that matched the amounts Victor had mentioned. Ada Chen filed additional charges against Daniel. Conspiracy to commit murder, witness intimidation, solicitation of violence. Victor Kozlov was charged with terroristic threats and conspiracy. Daniel's sentence was extended to 45 years. He'd be 75 years old before he'd be eligible for parole. Victor got 15 years, but the incident made our decision easy. We weren't waiting until summer. 2 weeks later, on a rainy April morning, Marcus drove us to the airport. My shop was sold to a young couple who loved antiques as much as I did. Sophie had resigned from her teaching position. Ethan thought we were going on an adventure. Portland's nice, Marcus said as we checked our bags. Rains a lot, but it's peaceful, and I've got friends there who'll keep an eye on you. I hugged him tightly. Thank you for everything. You did the heavy lifting, Kayla. I just helped with the paperwork. At the gate, I looked back at Boston one last time. This city had been my home for 30 years. Tom was buried here. My life was here, but my daughter and grandson were boarding a plane to Oregon, and they were my life now. The flight was smooth. We landed in Portland to gray skies and soft rain. A local private investigator named Sarah Clark picked us up and drove us to our new house. It was small, a 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet neighborhood called Irvington. Cherry trees lined the street. The house had a garden out back. The neighborhood was full of families with young kids. "Welcome home," Sarah said. That word, home, felt strange. But as Ethan ran through the empty rooms, his voice echoing with excitement, I thought maybe it could be true. Maybe we could build a new home here, away from Daniel, away from the Brooks family, away from everything that had tried to destroy us. 1 year later, I stood in my new shop, Foster's Vintage and Antiques, now located in Portland's Pearl District. The space was smaller than my Boston shop, but charming, with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in the soft Pacific Northwest light. Business was good. Portland loved antiques, loved history, loved the stories behind old objects. I'd made friends with other shop owners on the block. I'd joined a book club. I'd started dating a retired teacher named Robert, who made terrible jokes but had kind eyes. Sophie was thriving. She'd gotten a job teaching 4th grade at a school 10 minutes from our house. The principal loved her. The kids adored her. And the scars on her arms, they were fading. Not gone, never gone, but fading. Becoming part of her history rather than her present. Ethan was happy. He'd made friends quickly, joined the soccer team, started taking piano lessons. He rarely asked about his father anymore. And me, I was learning what it meant to live without fear, to walk to my car at night without checking over my shoulder, to sleep without nightmares of Daniel Brooks finding us. One afternoon, as I was arranging a new shipment of Depression-era glassware, my phone rang. Marcus, Kayla, how's Portland? Rainy, beautiful, perfect. How's Boston? Cold, busy. I've got news about Daniel. My stomach tightened. What kind of news? Good news. The prison had an incident last month. Daniel got into a fight with another inmate. He's in the hospital wing now, probably looking at more time added to his sentence. Is he? He'll survive. But Kayla, the other inmate? He was doing time for murder. Beat his own wife to death. When he found out what Daniel did to Sophie, Marcus paused. Let's just say there's a code even in prison. Wife beaters aren't popular. I should feel sorry for him, I said. But you don't. No, I don't. After we hung up, I walked to the shop window and looked out at the Portland street. Pedestrians hurried past under umbrellas. A streetcar dinged as it passed. Life moved forward. That evening, Sophie and Ethan came to the shop after school. We'd made a tradition of it. Tea and cookies in my back room before we all went home for dinner. Mom, Sophie said as we sat together, watching Ethan draw at the small table. I have something to tell you. What is it? She smiled, a real genuine smile that lit up her whole face. I've been talking to a therapist about writing a book. About my experience, about surviving abuse. She thinks other women need to hear my story. Are you ready for that? I think so. Not for revenge. Not to hurt Daniel. but to help other women who are where I was, to show them they can survive, they can escape, they can rebuild. I reached across and took her hand, feeling the faint texture of scars under my fingers. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope so. And Mom, she squeezed my hand. Thank you for not giving up on me, for fighting when I couldn't fight for myself, for being willing to leave your whole life behind to keep us safe. You're my daughter. I'd do it 1,000 times over. That night, after Sophie and Ethan left, I stayed in the shop a while longer. I pulled out an old photograph from my desk, Tom and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and naive about what life would bring. We did it, I whispered to the photo. We saved her. Outside, the Portland rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, making everything new. And inside my small shop, surrounded by antiques that had survived their own trials and emerged beautiful, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Real. Deep, lasting peace. Daniel Brooks was in prison where he belonged. Sophie was healing. Ethan was safe. And we were 3,000 miles away, building new lives in a city that knew nothing about burns or trials or old Boston money. We were finally truly free, and that freedom, earned through courage and pain and a mother's fierce love, was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned. 3 years after we moved to Portland, on a sunny Saturday morning in June, I received a package at my shop. It was a book, hardcover, the title in bold letters across the front, Scars to Strength, One Woman's Journey from Abuse to Freedom by Sophie Foster Brooks. I opened it with trembling hands. The dedication page read, For my mother, Kayla Foster, who taught me that love isn't just comfort, it's courage, who showed me that a mother's protection is the most powerful force in the world. And for every woman still trapped in silence, your story matters. Your life matters. You deserve freedom. Tears blurred my vision as I turned the pages. Sophie had written everything. The burns, the fear, the shame, the moment she finally told me. She'd written about Marcus, about the trial, about Daniel's conviction, and she'd written about healing. The book ended with a chapter called Starting Over that described our first morning in Portland, waking up in a house where fear didn't live anymore. I called her immediately. Sophie, I just got the book. And? Her voice was nervous. What do you think? I think you're the bravest person I've ever known. She laughed, but I could hear her crying too. The publisher wants me to do a book tour. Talk shows, interviews. Are you okay with that? With people knowing our story, it's not about me. It's your story to tell. And if it helps even one woman find the courage to leave, I stopped, emotion catching in my throat. Then it's worth it. The book launched 3 weeks later. Within a month, it was on the New York Times bestseller list. Sophie did interviews with NPR, The Today Show, even a special on 60 Minutes about domestic violence in wealthy families. Reporters asked her constantly about Daniel, where he was, if she'd heard from him, if she was afraid he'd get out someday. Her answer never changed. Daniel Brooks is in prison where he belongs. He has no power over me anymore. I refuse to spend my life looking over my shoulder. I survived. That's what matters. The publicity brought something unexpected. Letters. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Women from all over the country writing to Sophie, thanking her for speaking out, telling their own stories, asking for advice. Sophie started a nonprofit organization called Scars to Strength. She partnered with domestic violence shelters, offered free resources for women trying to escape abuse, created a legal fund to help victims who couldn't afford lawyers. Marcus became a consultant for the organization, training volunteers on how to safely gather evidence of abuse. Ada Jennifer Chen joined the advisory board, helping women navigate the legal system. Even Catherine Brooks, Daniel's mother, donated a substantial amount to the organization, though she did it anonymously. I found out only because Marcus told me. She was trying, in her own way, to atone for the years she'd protected her son instead of his victims. One afternoon, about 6 months after the book launched, I was at home making dinner when Ethan came running in from school. Grandma, guess what happened today? He was 10 now, taller, his voice starting to change. The little boy was becoming a young man. What happened? My history teacher assigned Mom's book for our class to read. She said it's an important story about standing up to injustice. I told her, that's my mom. And then everyone thought it was so cool. Sophie came in behind him, laughing. His teacher called me. She wants me to come speak to the class. Ethan keeps telling everyone I'm famous. You are famous, I said. You're also brave and strong and… My phone rang. Marcus. Kayla, turn on CNN. I grabbed the remote, switching on the TV. The headline across the bottom of the screen made my heart stop. Daniel Brooks found dead in prison cell. The reporter was speaking. Former Boston banker Daniel Brooks, who was serving a 45-year sentence for domestic violence and financial fraud, was found dead in his cell this morning at FCI Cumberland. Prison officials say Brooks died by suicide. He was 41 years old. Brooks gained notoriety 3 years ago when his ex-wife, Sophie Brooks, wrote a best-selling memoir about surviving his abuse. Sophie stood frozen, staring at the screen. "Mom?" Ethan said quietly, looking between us. "Is that…" "Yes," Sophie said, her voice strangely flat. "That's your father," the news continued. Details about Daniel's death, speculation about why he'd done it. Interviews with people who'd known him before his arrest, all of them shocked, all of them saying they'd never have guessed he was capable of such violence. I turned off the TV. "How do you feel?" I asked Sophie. She sat down slowly, her hands in her lap. Ethan sat beside her, his hand on her arm. "I don't know," she finally said. "I thought I'd feel relief, or happiness, or something, but I just feel empty. Like this chapter is finally truly closed. Is that bad?" Ethan asked. "No, sweetheart, it's not bad." Sophie pulled him close. "It means we can move forward now, completely. No more looking back." That night, after Ethan went to bed, Sophie and I sat on my porch with glasses of wine, watching fireflies blink in the garden. "Do you think he regretted it?" Sophie asked. "What he did to me? To Melissa? To all those families he stole from? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he just couldn't face spending the rest of his life in prison. Marcus called while you were putting Ethan to bed. He said Daniel left a note. The prison's not releasing it publicly, but Marcus has a contact who told him what it said." "And?" "It said, 'I'm sorry,' that's all. Just those 2 words." We sat in silence for a while, letting that sink in. "It doesn't fix anything," Sophie said. "Those 2 words. They don't undo the burns. They don't give back the money he stole. They don't erase the trauma." "No," I agreed. "They don't. But maybe," Sophie's voice was soft, "maybe it means he finally understood what he'd done. That he couldn't hide behind his family name or his money anymore. That he was just a man who'd hurt people. And maybe that realization was too much for him to live with. Does it give you closure?" Sophie thought about this. "I don't think I need closure from him. I got my closure 3 years ago when we left Boston. When we built this life here. When I wrote the book. When I started helping other women. That's my closure. Daniel's death, it's just the end of a chapter I'd already moved past." The next morning, news outlets called constantly, wanting statements from Sophie about Daniel's death. She released one through her publisher. "I'm saddened to hear about Daniel Brooks's death. No one should suffer to the point where they feel death is their only option. I hope his death serves as a reminder that domestic violence destroys not just victims, but perpetrators too. If you're in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. You deserve a life free from fear." The media praised her for her grace. "I just saw my daughter being the bigger person, even when she didn't have to be." A week after Daniel's death, Marcus flew out to Portland to see us. "I wanted to tell you in person," he said over dinner at my house. The Brooks family settled all the remaining restitution claims. Every family Daniel stole from has been paid back in full, plus interest. Richard Brooks liquidated several properties to do it. He said he wanted to make things right. "That's good," I said. "Those families deserve that money. There's more." Catherine Brooks has been volunteering at a domestic violence shelter in Boston. Apparently, she's been doing it for a year, quietly. She hasn't told anyone who she is, just volunteers under her maiden name. Sophie looked surprised. "Really? Really?" "And Melissa, Daniel's first wife? She's in therapy, finally dealing with what he did to her. She said Sophie's book gave her the courage to stop hiding." After Marcus left, Sophie stood in my kitchen looking at family photos on my refrigerator. Pictures of her and Ethan, pictures of the 3 of us at the Oregon coast, at Powell's bookstore, at Ethan's soccer games. "We made it, Mom," she said softly. "We actually made it. We did. And you know what the craziest part is? I'm happy, actually genuinely happy. I wake up every morning without fear. I go to work and love what I do. I come home to a son who's thriving. I wrote a book that's helping people. How did we get here? We got here because you were brave enough to tell the truth. And because we didn't give up." Sophie hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for saving my life." "You saved yourself, sweetheart. I just helped with the paperwork. She laughed, and the sound was pure joy. No shadows, no fear. Just my daughter, healed and whole and free. Daniel Brooks was gone. But the life he'd tried to destroy, it had bloomed anyway, stronger, more beautiful, unbreakable. And that, I thought, was the truest form of justice. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just survival. Growth. Joy. The scars remained. They always would. But scars are just proof that you survived something that tried to kill you. And we had survived. We had won. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that uncover the hidden truths of everyday life. There are so many more untold stories waiting to be revealed. Thank you for being here. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in their place? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them with me in the comments below. On the screen, you can see 2 more life stories I strongly recommend. There are many more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.